need drug testing? Absolutely. Especially since the National Center of Addiction and Substance Abuse says that 80% of high school kids and 44% of middle school students have personally witnessed drug use, dealing, and selling. To discourage teenage drug use, mandatory drug testing in schools should not only be supported, but also be encouraged. Student Drug Testing Coalition in 2008 stated that more than 60% of teenagers drugs were used, kept, and sold at their school. We can no longer ignore the drug influence coming from within these walls. So to understand the benefits of drug testing students, first, we must realize the extent that teenagers are exposed to drug use. Second, become aware of how drug use affects them daily. And third, we need to know that drug testing can be done fairly and privately. And lastly, drug testing will help us guide our children into a drug-free future. After all, as John Walters, director of the National Drug Policy, stated, that research shows that people who make it through their teenage years without using drugs are less likely to start in their future. First, when teenagers use drugs, it leads to many self-destructive and violent behaviors. These teenagers often don't do well in school due to the fact that they're either missing classes or they cannot concentrate on their classwork. Drug use also leads to other criminal behavior, beginning with petty crimes like property destruction and stealing, and can escalate to assault and carrying concealed weapons. These children, once they're older, tend to not graduate high school, which will lead to a higher unemployment rate and more criminal activity in their adult lives. So by drug testing our children in school, we are preventing our children from using drugs, which will help them become more productive, successful adults. Second, when a teenager uses drugs, it affects many aspects of their life. Research shows that the brain in the teenage years is still developing, and drug use will inhibit its development. This reduces that child's ability to problem solve and retain memory. These children also are socially underdeveloped due to the fact that the drugs may make them withdrawn, and they will have a lack of interaction with their peers and other adults. Also, these children may be emotionally traumatized from witnessing the violence that often follows with drug activity. It's also important to know that teenagers, once they become addicted, will take twice as long to recover as an adult would from addiction. So there aren't many aspects in a teenager's life that aren't affected when they're using drugs. Third, the drug testing methods and evaluations are both ethical and fair for all of the students. There are many types of common drug tests that we use, be it the breathalyzer, which is a breath test to test for alcohol, a urine test, or a sweat test where they stick a patch on the child's arm, collect sweat, and test that for alcohol and drugs. All of these tests can be paid for by a grant from the government, so it's no cost to the district or the parent. Tests are often done by an unbiased drug counselor, and the results are held private from anyone except for the family and local school officials. Once the child leaves school, these records are destroyed, so it does not affect their future life. If a child happens to test positive for a drug test, they are sent to a medical facility where a licensed physician does a follow-up test to confirm the accuracy of the drug test. The children that actually do test positive, they're not meant to be punished. They are meant to be helped. These children will receive 90 days of mandatory outpatient drug counseling. They will also be removed from extracurricular activities to allow time for them to focus on their treatment and their drug counseling. The school also reserves the right to revoke their parking privileges to ensure that they're not driving under the influence. And of course, their parents are informed if other medical situations need to be approached. Drug testing and evaluation is not meant as a punishment. It's meant to guide our teenagers away from drugs. Lastly, drug testing students provides benefits for everyone involved. Parents are informed much sooner of a potential drug problem as if the child were to keep it a secret and not be drug tested in their teenage years. And the sooner the teenager can receive treatment, the better the chances there are for recovery. However, most teenagers report that they do not use drugs for fear of actually testing positive, so the actual fear of the test is a deterrent for them. We can't raise a drug-free generation, but we need to be aware of the drug use as soon as possible. As a community, if we're going to gain the upper hand on this war on drugs, we must get more aggressive with our prevention methods with our children. First, we need a realistic knowledge of the extent of drug use of our teenagers. Second, we must be aware of how drug use affects their daily lives. Third, we must be confident in the drug testing policies and processes. And last, with so many benefits for our children, it is counterproductive not to drug test. If you think this does not apply to you, you are sadly mistaken. No one is unaffected. Consider research by the Drug Testing Network that says the average starting age for hard addictive drugs like cocaine and heroin is 14. And that's just the average. Most children are starting at the age of 12. So what should you do? Talk to your children and find out what kind of drug influences they face in their school. Find out if they feel like drug testing would be a good option for them and their friends. Because by drug testing our kids in school, we can actively stand up for their future and for their safety. After all, there are some lessons in school that should not be taught, and that one is drug use. So, drug test our students for the sake of their future and for the sake of their innocence.
That was good.
Can you tell me one more time?